Hi there! Welcome to the first real episode of Creative Quilting the K-Way. Today we're going to talk about some terms. What do some basic things mean in quilting? When I first started quilting, I had no idea what all these words were, so I thought I would make your life easier by telling you the words, explaining them, showing them to you. So I've got a list here. First thing is yard goods. What the heck are yard goods? Yard goods are just fabric on a bolt. So these are all yard goods. And also there's a word called gray goods. So when you buy fabric, if you buy it at a regular quilt shop, you're getting quilt shop quality fabric, and it means that the gray goods, or the base product, the base fabric that the design is printed on, is going to be very high quality. There's going to be varying qualities in gray goods. So you may find some other fabrics other places that are going to feel very different. They're going to feel like they're full of starch or stabilizer because the gray goods that they're printed on are not as high quality. So I've got a bunch of different fabrics here. What kinds are they? Oh, they're silk. I've got regular quilting cottons. Got some plaids here to show you. So this plaid is a printed plaid. That means that the design is printed on top of it, not to be confused with a woven plaid. The design is actually woven in, so it's going to look exactly the same on the front and the back. On the printed plaid, the back side of the fabric is going to look very different because it's only printed on one side. Okay. We also have another one here that's a printed one. You can see it's darker on the front than it is on the back. And we're going to learn something about ripping that in just a second. So what is bias? So bias means that if I take this piece of fabric and I stretch it like this, I'm stretching it on the bias. So the bias is that angle, okay? So the angle that goes across right like that. This is the bias. We use that term when we talk about making bias binding. We also use bias as a term for something that we used to do a long time ago when we would get our fabric all squared up before we made garments. We might get a piece of yard good that looked like a parallelogram instead of a square. So to get it in square is what we called it. You would take it and just stretch it on the bias each way to try to make that fabric nice and square. This is a batik fabric. We talk about the right and wrong sides of fabric. This one's easy to see, isn't it? We've got the right side here, the wrong side here. It's not quite so easy on batik. One side is going to have a little more definition than the other side. So if I look at that side versus this side, subtle difference. Now, which one is the right one and which is the wrong one? Well, I like this side. You may like this one better. But there's going to be a little bit of difference in the definition of the print on the good side or pretty side of the fabric, whichever one you want to call the good or the pretty side. Here's just another printed cotton. The back side looks very different, right? So that one's easy to tell which is the pretty side. On a fabric like this, there may be absolutely no difference, okay? Look at the front side of the back side, and it looks exactly the same. Same thing is going to be true on a cone of cotton, right? So this piece of black fabric is a cone of cotton. Means it's exactly the same on the front and the back. And here's flannel. We also quilt with flannel. I quilt with anything. I throw anything that I want to in there. So these are gray goods. These are fabrics. These are our yard goods. We talked about the right and wrong side. We talked about the bias. What is crosswise grain and straight grain? Well, crosswise grain would be, if you look at the fabric, and you identify the selvage edges, if you stretch across the yard goods, there's going to be a little stretchiness, a little give. That's crosswise. If I take the fabric parallel to the selvage and try to stretch it, it's not going to give like the crosswise does. So crosswise has a little stretch, Straight of grain has no stretch, okay? Then we get these little edges on our fabric, and there's little pin pricks, little holes where it was on the whatever machine makes this fabric, the thing that stretches it, puts those little pinholes in there. Those are called selvages. And selvage is something that you never want to use in your quilt unless you're specifically doing a selvage quilt. It does not stretch at all. So whereas you have a crosswise stretch, right? You have a straight of grain, no stretch, the selvage really doesn't give at all. So if you left that on your yard goods to put it in a quilt, it's not going to give and play and behave like the rest of the yard goods. How do you get it off? Well, that's easy. You rip it off. So ripping fabric scares some people. I actually love it. I love the sound of it. It reminds me of my grandma. My grandma made quilts for all of her children, her grandchildren, and her great-grandchildren. She never owned a rotary cutter or mat. She used scissors and she used a cereal box template. She cut the template into a 2.5-inch marker, made snips in the fabric, and she ripped all the 2.5-inch strips for the log cabin quilts that she made for everybody. So this sound, this awesome ripping sound, I love. Takes me right back to my grandma. So what I did is I took 2 little snips and ripped off the selvage. Get them out of the way. They don't behave like the rest of the yard goods. So we get rid of those. Now, I said something about straight of grain, right? This fabric, if you can see this edge, it's already been ripped, which means it's on the straight. Let's get the other side and see if it's been ripped as well. Nope. So if I want to square up this piece of fabric for a quilt back, I can just take a snip here in my fold and rip it right off. Now this is going to rip exactly on the grain, okay? So it's ripping right on the cross grain. So now I have a nice straight edge. Okay. That's with Kona cotton. Now, can I rip all fabrics? A lot of them I can. Some aren't going to rip as well, and we'll talk about that more in another episode where we specifically talk about ripping fabrics, and we'll come back and visit these and rip them all. But just know now that you want to rip your backs to get them nice and square, and I'm going to show you how to do that right now. I have 2 quilt tops, and one of the things that we learn right away when we're quilting is that when you have a quilt back, the outside is going to have an excess of 4 inches all the way around. Okay, so on this little quilt top, I have an extra 4 inches all the way around. I need to get a back for it. So I can get my measuring tools out if I want and measure my quilt and add 8 inches, or you can be lazy like I am. Just take your yard goods, open it up. First thing I'm going to do is see if it's wide enough. And look at that, it is. So I know that it's wide enough this way. Now I'm going to just lay my fabric on top of my batting. Get a little bit out there. And I'm going to take a snip. And if I rip that right across, I know that I'm getting it right on the grain, right on the cross grain. So now I know I have my piece wide enough that way. Now I'm going to rip my selvages off, right? So I'll go to this end, take a snip, rip that selvage off, get rid of that, and go over to this side of my batting. See how easy that is? I don't have to measure, I don't have to do anything. I can just lay it right together. Now I have a quilt back that is 4 inches larger all the way around. In another episode, I'm going to show you what to do with that excess if you long arm quilt. How you're going to use this excess fabric to make a hanging sleeve so it's not wasted fabric. Now you may wonder, why do we need this excess? Well, we need it because when we're quilting, we need to have a place to check our tension. Okay? So this is giving us not only stability to load it on a frame or something to hang on if we're doing it on our conventional machine, but we need a place to try some stitches to try things out and make sure the tension of our threads is right before we start quilting on our actual quilt. So that's what that 4 inches all the way around means and what it's for. What is value? Value means how dark or how light a fabric is. So if we're looking at value, and we look at this particular card, we can see that there are some changes in value, but it's not a huge difference. If I add a lighter one, now we're really seeing the difference, the value difference from this one to this one. And what if I take it yet another degree? So now we're seeing a huge jump in value. Light or dark is what that means. Now there's a tool you can get. Oh, these are called Sew Red glasses. You get them at sewredglasses.com, and you can wear these, and it's going to take the color out of whatever fabric it is you're looking at. So if I look at this now, I can really see the value. If these had been colored fabrics, this becomes very important because color kind of gets in the way when we're trying to determine value. So you can look through these red glasses. You could also squint, which will do it as well. Or take off your glasses. So if I look at this without my glasses on, I'm just seeing value, pure value, nothing else. What's scale? Well, scale is how big or how small the print is. So these cards showed us different values, but we didn't really talk about what kind of print it is. We're just looking at pure value. Well, scale is shown on here. So this is a small scale print. These are some dark small scales. Then we have medium scale. It's getting a little bit bigger, right? Here's dark medium scale prints. And then we have large scale prints. Why is this important? Well, it can make your fabric choices much more exciting, make your quilts more exciting if you pay attention to scale in addition to value. So here's a couple of cards that I've put together with some choices that I think work really well. In this one, we've got very small scale, a little bit bigger scale, and large scale, along with big value differences, which will make an exciting quilt. Here's another one. So we've got a couple of large scale, but we've also got some very small scale to contrast that, and a nice solid to really give us a big value swing, which is going to make an exciting quilt as well. Here's another great choice. So we've got small scale print, medium, and large. So we're hitting everything right there. And we're also hitting a big value change, very light to very dark. And here's another one. So we've got different scales, right? Different scales in there and a big value jump, which is going to give us a great looking quilt. This value jump is called contrast. So when you hear that, that's what that means. What's the difference? What's the jump? How big is the stair step in your value changes? That's what contrast means. A couple other things let's tackle before we leave today. We talk about thread weight. And thread weight is different than needle size. So when we talk about needle size and we get to a bigger number, that means that the needle is bigger, right? Bigger number on a needle, bigger needle. With thread, when we get to a larger number, it means the thread is skinnier. So an 80 weight thread is going to be very, very skinny. A 12 weight thread is going to be very chunky. We'll revisit threads again another day and some needles another day as well, but that gives you a little intro to what those words are, what they mean, and what you're going to do with them when you're doing creative quilting. So let's see, what have I learned today? Oh, I know. When I brush my teeth, I'm probably going to have fresher breath if I remember to put toothpaste on the toothbrush. That's a thing I've learned today. Doesn't have a whole lot to do with quilting, but it will make your life better. Remember, in creative quilting, wherever you are is where you should be. Thank you for joining me, and come back again next time.